beautiful thing about it is there's no one person setting the direction. And there's no one person on the other side that can stop it. So we have something that is pretty organic in nature and very principled in its original design. I think the Bitcoin white paper is one of the most seminal works of computer science in the last 20, 30 years. It's poetry. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's
really
pretty
is.
cool technology. I mean, that's not often talked about. There's so much sort of hype around digital currency about sort of the financial impacts of it, but the actual technology is quite beautiful from a computer science perspective.
Yeah, and the underlying principles behind it that went into it, even to the point of releasing it under a pseudonym. I think that's a very, very powerful statement. The timing of when it was released is powerful. It was a total activist move. I mean, it's moving the world forward in a way that I think is extremely noble and honorable and enables everyone to be part of the story, which is also really cool. So you asked a question around 10 years and 20 years. I mean, I think the amazing thing is no one knows. And it can emerge, and every person that comes into the ecosystem, whether they be a developer or someone who uses it, can change its direction in small and large ways. And that's what I think it should be, because that's what the internet has shown is possible. Now there's complications with that, of course, and there's certainly companies that own large parts of the internet and can direct it more than others, and there's not equal access to every single person in the world just yet, but all those problems are visible enough to speak about them, and to me that gives confidence that they're solvable in a relatively short time frame. I think the world changes a lot as we get these satellites projecting the internet down to Earth, because it just removes a bunch of the former constraints and really levels the playing field. But a global currency, which a native currency for the internet is a proxy for, is a very powerful concept. And I don't think any one person on this planet truly understands the ramifications of that. I think there's a lot of positives to it. There's some negatives as well.
Do you think it's possible, sorry to interrupt, do you think it's possible that this kind of digital currency would redefine the nature of money, so become the main currency of the world, as opposed to being tied to fiat currency of different nations, and sort of really push the decentralization of control of money?
Definitely, but I think the bigger ramification is how it affects how society works, and I think there are many positive ramifications
Outside of just
that.
money,
outside of just money. Money is a foundational layer that enables so much more. I was meeting with an entrepreneur in Ethiopia, and payments is probably the number one problem to solve across the continent. Both in terms of moving money across borders between nations on the continent, or the amount of corruption within the current system. But the lack of easy ways to pay people makes starting anything really difficult. I met an entrepreneur who started the Lyft/Uber of Ethiopia, and one of the biggest problems she has is that it's not easy for her riders to pay the company, and it's not easy for her to pay the drivers. And that definitely has stunted her growth and made everything more challenging. So the fact that she even has to think about payments instead of thinking about the best rider experience and the best driver experience is pretty telling. So I think as we get a more durable, resilient, and global standard, we see a lot more innovation everywhere. And I think there's no better case study for this than the various countries within Africa and their entrepreneurs who are trying to start things within health or sustainability or transportation, or a lot of the companies that we've seen here. So the majority of companies I met in November, when I spent a month on the continent, were payments oriented.
You mentioned, and there's a small tangent, you mentioned the anonymous launch of Bitcoin is a sort of profound philosophical statement.
Pseudonymous.
What's that even mean? Like there's a pseudonym. First
Well,
of all, let me ask.
there's an identity tied to it. It's not just anonymous. It's
I see.
Nakamoto. So Nakamoto might represent one person or multiple people. But
All right, let me ask: are you Satoshi Nakamoto? Just
No.
checking.
And if I were, would I tell you?
Yeah, that's true.
But
Maybe you slip.
A pseudonym is constructed identity. Anonymity is just kind of this, random, like drop something off and leave. There's no intention to build an identity around it. And while the identity being built was a short time window, it was meant to stick around, I think, and to be known. And it's being honored in, how the community thinks about building it. Like the concept of Satoshis, for instance, is one such example. But I think it was smart not to do it anonymous, not to do it as a real identity, but to do it as pseudonym because I think it builds tangibility and a little bit of empathy that this was a human or a set of humans behind it. And there's this natural identity that I can imagine.
But there is also a sacrifice of ego. That's a pretty powerful thing from your perspective.
Which is beautiful. Yeah.
Would you do, sort of philosophically, to ask you the question, would you do all the same things you're doing now if your name wasn't attached to it? Sort of, if you had to sacrifice the ego? Put another way, is your ego deeply tied in the decisions you've been making?
I hope not. I believe I would certainly attempt to do the things without my name having to be attached with it. But it's hard to do that in a corporation legally. That's the issue. If I were to do more open source things, then absolutely. Like I don't need my particular identity, my real identity associated with it. But I think, the appreciation that comes from doing something good and being able to see it and see people use it is pretty overwhelming and powerful, more so than maybe seeing your name in the headlines.